Welcome back to Best Books Ever. I'm Tyler, and today we are going to be finishing The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, chapters 21 through 30, plus there's a little bit of a epilogue at the end. Very bittersweet epilogue, but we'll get to that in a moment. Um, Overall, before we get into anything, get into the specifics, I think a big question going into the book was how necessary was this story going to be? Um, Obviously, with the trilogy being so good, it got movies and all that too, which I think were less good, but still fun, right? And then we get Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I don't exactly know the timeline. I feel like the Ballad movie or the Ballad book may have come out after the movies, maybe. And then they made a movie very recently, I think like last year. And now they announced another book with another movie already in the works. But yeah, so I think overall, I think this book was very much worth it. I thought it was very, very good. It was a nice addition. It didn't feel like it was like retconning a bunch of stuff unnecessarily. It didn't feel like, a cash grab of like, oh, this does so well, so now we're going to write another book just ancillarily just to make some more money and ride that hype train and all that. But yeah, so I wanted to get that out the way. Because I think we've read prequels before. We read a couple for King Killer, but those were sort of like, those were like short stories. This was like a full on, a whole thing. That being said, there are things about this book that I hate, but not in the actual hate. More so just like in world, I hate them. And I guess that's what we're going to start with because this book, there's a lot of stuff, right? We get here, there's peacekeepers, there's a lot of, Coriolanus being a peacekeeper, what his life's like. We got Sejanus back, we got Lucy Gray stuff, we got capital stuff and the differences between the capital and the districts. We got Dr. Gall even making an appearance, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens with these characters that I could talk about, but I'm not going to because there's really a few hot spots that I think are way more worth focusing on and way more exciting. So I just don't know where I want to start. I know where I want to start, but I feel like if I start there, that's it. I mean, not really. I feel like the two big things that I want to talk about are Lucy Gray and her line, and then Coriolanus and kind of how he gets to where he gets. Those are really the two big things. So I'll start with the Lucy Gray stuff because Corio is our main character, and I feel like I should end with that. So Lucy Gray. Up until this point, I feel like y'all know this already. I've been pretty clear. Love Lucy Gray. Fantastic character. I think that we will get to some very interesting lineage with her District 12 stuff and even how that could and should connect to Katniss and her District 12 stuff. But right now, we'll just stick with her and who she is, right? One thing I love, and already connecting it to Corio, but one thing I love about them too is, we have the beginning where they get back together. It's like, oh my God, he's here, and there's this kind of question, at least in my mind, where how genuine was their love for each other. Like, we're in Corio's mind, so we can kind of tell for the most part, yes, he does really like her. But we're not in Lucy Gray's mind, so we're like, is this real? Was this just her playing a game? Not necessarily using him with malicious intent, but at the very least, was it just caught up in the moment? She thought she was going to die, so everything around her kind of, was it very heightened? Maybe even her emotions, right? Um, that's not true, right? We get to the point where they're very much in love, right? They see each other, they embrace. It's awesome the way they're talking, their body language, what they're saying to each other. It's amazing. and want to point this out, not just for the sake of I love it, but also because it's very different coming off of the trilogy where this is not what Katniss and Peeta's relationship was. This was more so Peeta was infatuated with Katniss. Peeta didn't really know Katniss, did never talk to her, right? He was infatuated with her for, pretty much since they were kids, right? I forget exactly, but they were young, right? Way before the whole bread incident. And so he's just kind of been harboring that for his whole life of like, maybe one day, but there's Gale, and Gale's so much better than me. And then kind of through the games, they had their connection, and, that was kind of Peeta's opening and whatever, right? So even that's very like infatuation, not quite love, not quite, And then on Katniss' side, it was pure strategy, right? I would say up until there was a point in the first games where I think it started to take a real turn of like, oh, maybe, Then as it's gone on, and obviously, we know the epilogue to the end of the trilogy where it's like, oh no, they are a thing, and then but even in that, there are questions of her loyalty, and like even the conversation that Peeta and Gale had, where it's like, is this love or is this just like a more of like an animalistic instinct of like, I need you to survive. I don't necessarily love you, not in like a romantic way, but I can't live without you, which in some ways can go hand in hand, but in other ways they are opposite of each other. With this right here, Lucy Gray and Coriolanus, it's like, oh no, this is just classic love. It's like they really just want to spend time with each other, be with each other. They, in any given moment, they would say, I would do anything to get, to get close to this other person. So that's something I wanted to point out, of like how different it is. Obviously the situation surrounding it is troubled, I would say. There are obstacles that they kind of have to maneuver, but deep down it is reciprocated, whereas I think the other big relationship we had in the trilogy was not only was it not reciprocated, but they were both planted through desperation and through survival, right? Like the games brought both of these couples together. They just went on completely different paths, even to where they ended. Sticking with Lucy Gray specifically. What else do we have? I mean, I guess we just I wanted to keep them separate, but I really can't. I guess I just go through all this chronologically because they weave together so often, so quickly. Next thing, Lucy Gray and Coriolanus fundamentally disagree about the Capitol. And this is something that I think I'll get a little deeper into when I focus more on Corio towards the end. But it's rough. I like that for both of them, that they are their own people and neither of them want to bend for the other person. It is tough though. It is tough in the moment being like, just stop talking about this, because this is going to cause y'all to have like an argument, and that's going to, if y'all been following, the different series I've been covering on here, there's been a few couples on here that have had arguments that have derailed, any further progression in their relationship, and it is hard. It is very hard to watch, very hard to read. So, kind of get flashbacks of that with this, and it's like, ooh, just stop, Obviously, Corio is more pro-capital growing up there and all that, and Lucy Gray's like, what about my dad, who got shot about 11 times for just kind of speaking his mind, just being him, right? And it kind of caused me to do this whole Covey stuff. I was thrown to the Hunger Games. Not only could I have died, but I also killed people. 3 people, I believe, is what she said. So it's like, how necessary is this? We talked about this last episode, where it's like, how much do we have to remind the districts? Do we have to keep doing this? Is this wrong? And Lucy Gray's lived it, you know? So that's more of a point of contention. And I guess all of this kind of leads to, with her story, this is one of the more, out of all the book series, chapters that we've done so far, I think this is one of, if not the most frustrating end to a character. We have Lucy Gray, and this crazy scene at the end where like I'm trying to follow, and I'm like, what is even happening right now? Because it is in this weird state of like panic and almost like hallucinating on Corio's part. But if you remember, we have the scene where they're gonna go out, they're going to escape, they're gonna run away north, and Lucy Gray leaves to go get some firewood or something, doesn't come back. Right, Corio starts looking for her. He starts panicking. He starts getting paranoid. He starts thinking these thoughts of like, oh, she's turning on me, whatever. Right, we'll get kind of deeper into that in a moment. But then like a snake bites him, and then he starts freaking out because that is the confirmation that like she's turned on him because she's the snake girl, and whatever. She's like, oh my god, and he's like, oh, it's poison. I'm gonna die. Escapes, and we just don't see Lucy Gray again. We don't see her. In fact, the last time we for sure saw her was when she left to go get more wood or whatever, or I think she was gonna go try and find more Katniss to kind of roast those up. I believe actually. Never saw her again. Not even in the epilogue do we get any sort of like her body was found, or there's been whispers of some girl leading the north or whatever. You know what I mean? Nothing at all. And it's just so frustrating because like I said, after this we'll kind of get into more Corio specific stuff without Lucy Gray, but it's just because, everything we talked about so far with I truly believing their love being genuine. Now there's all these questions, right? Of like, I don't think we can question Lucy Gray's love. I don't think that she was playing him the whole time or anything like that. If I were to guess, right, because nothing is confirmed, it's just she's gone. We don't see her again. We don't see that she was killed. We don't see that she was nothing, right? I don't know, because we get into Corio being paranoid, and that is a huge, reoccurring thing for him. He was thinking that she put two and two together, that he got Sejanus killed. And so his rationale was Lucy Gray found this out. She was horrified, and so she left him. Do I think she's the one who like planted a snake or maybe led him to a snake? I don't think so. I don't know. It just seems way too convenient. I mean, again, his paranoia was like, oh, I remember when the girl, I don't remember the girl's name, the like younger girl. I don't remember her name, but she said that, Lucy Gray always knows where the snakes are. She somehow knows them and she can like handle them or whatever. So clearly Lucy Gray knew where the snakes were and she led me to them so I can get bit. It wasn't poisonous, though. It wasn't venomous. So, I don't know what the point would be. He also thought that she saw her like running in the woods or something. I don't know if I believe that. I feel like he was in a huge state of panic and paranoia. Nothing he saw soon after he left the little shed to go look for her can be trusted. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it would be too boring of an answer to be like, oh no, she truly went to go find more Katniss and stuff. And, I don't think she got lost because she knows the way, like the back of her hand. I don't know. It'd be too boring to say that she like got caught. but like nothing she was doing was illegal, and they weren't after her for any reason. I mean, again, boring answer would be that one of the dudes, or maybe multiple of the people under the mayor's employ found her and killed her. Because remember, that was the whole thing of like the mayor suspecting that Lucy Gray killed his daughter, even though she didn't. Again, that's a possibility. I think that's a very boring answer to be like, oh yeah, she was killed. um, I don't want to follow Corio's paranoia, but I mean, him letting it slip that he killed three people and then being like, oh yeah, the third was me. I killed the past version of myself or something is like, I don't think Lucy Gray is dumb. I think she's very perceptive. Um, so maybe she figured that out. Maybe she put two and two together. Um, I mean, I maybe maybe love wins in the end, and maybe she truly led him out there with the intent to lose him because in her mind she was like, I love him too much. I can't let him throw his life away for me, right? Like, I'm going to the north by myself. I'm not letting him follow me, you know? So that whole time leading up to it, she was saying things to make him feel better, to make him want to be with her and come with her north, even though she was doing it just to make it so he lets his guard down. Maybe the love wins answer is actually the best answer, and it was all a ploy to get him so he went back and lived his life. And I don't know if he told her about the whole school thing. I don't remember, but like, I don't know, maybe that was it. It's tough because any speculation I feel like is equally plausible and also crazy and also like a weird conspiracy. But I don't know. At the end of the day, no matter what the answer was, I hate it. I hate that we don't get an answer, especially because I loved her character so much. And it is poetic, literally poetic, because there is the ballad that she was named after with the girl who, like, quote unquote, died or got lost. And it's like, oh, is she a ghost? What happened to her? You know? And so that's kind of the same thing here, where it's like, well, no one knows what happened to her. Did she die? Did she get lost? Who, if someone took her, who took her? Did she plan this? Was this by accident? Was this by happenstance? So it is very reflective of the ballad that we learned about earlier, that is her namesake. Um, I don't know. I don't know. It just kind of gives you like a very empty feeling of like, man, I wish I knew. I really wish I knew. And I'm sure there's theories out there. I haven't like looked into it or anything of like what the more plausible theories are, but it hurts. It hurts a whole lot. Um, we will talk about her again in a few moments because there's another thing from the epilogue that I think is pertinent to Lucy Gray's character and her possible legacy. But we'll get to that in a moment. Let's get back to Coriolanus. So some stuff that happened with him. We already talked about the Sejanus stuff. Just to touch on it again, a lot of my points and a lot of the things that they're highlighting towards the end of this book and in the epilogue are really indicative of Coriolanus and who he turns out to be, who he grows to be. This is a question that I had going into this book that we did discuss briefly of like, does this book do a good job leading us into who we know President Snow as in the trilogy? And I think it does. It does a few things very, very well that I think sets up the character for who we know he turns out to be and eventually dies as. So him, recording Sejanus' confession with the Jabberjays, sending them in. this is this is tough because this is something that I think I maybe mentioned last part, or maybe it was just me talking to myself. I don't know, but we did kind of touch on it already with his paranoia. I think that two things make up Coriolanus Snow and who he is to his core, to his DNA. One is his paranoia, right? Which, to further explain that, he's had that ever since he was a child, right? Ever since the war, he's had to put on this face, this snow facade of who he is, his wealth, his status, what he thinks, right? All this stuff. He has to put on a facade that the only people who really know are Tigress. I don't even think Grandman really fully comprehends everything. Like, Tigress is real, and then Lucy Gray sorta start to understand with, like, whatever Corio was able to give her. But, like, so ever since he was a child, he's constantly looking over his shoulder, constantly having his ear perked up to hear what people are saying about him, and his reputation, and again trying to save face and show that the Snows are strong, right? That's why it hit him so hard when I believe Dean Highbottom kind of smacked him in the face with, with the truth of, like, I know that you're not who you say you are. I know that you Snows are struggling, right? And kind of floored him, right? So that's the first part of his character, is his constant paranoia from birth, basically. The other part is the struggle internally between what he grew up on with the capital beliefs and all their, well, everything they got going on, versus him being part of the new generation and starting to kind of question some of the things that's gone on so far with the war, the capital, the games, and all that. We talked about that a bunch last episode. I'm not going to go, I'm not just going to retread everything I said. But, this kind of war, I think it pairs very well with Lucy Gray, because Lucy Gray is sort of that other side of it, right? That's why we talked about how they disagreed with the capital. There's a few times during the book where they just fundamentally disagree, and, like, Corio can kind of see some of the things she's saying, but it seems that when his back's against the wall, he always returns to defending the capital and trying to rationalize what they do or what they have done. And that just, again, goes against what Lucy Gray believes, because she's like, dog, I'm living it. Like, do you want me to recount my life for you? Meanwhile, Corio was like, I remember, just to give an example, instead of just explaining it a million times in different ways, when it was him and Sejanus, when they first decided to go visit Lucy Gray, they'd, like, tread out to wherever her place is in the Seam, right, which we know of fairly well because of Katniss. That's where she was from. They started to get further and further away from the town, the bustling town of District 12 or whatever, and started to get to the outskirts of Seam and all that, and we saw it being way more desolate, way more sad and depressing and oppressive, and the people there just seems like they've completely given up, right? And his thoughts were not, oh, poor people, or, oh, that sucks, they have to live that way, or the children, the whatever. Like, it wasn't sympathy. It was, how could these people live like this? How could they, like, all the money, all the resources that we put into the districts, and these people, the citizens of the districts, just throw it away? That was his reaction of, like, they are wasting what we are gifting them. We are we are generous gods here in the capital, and we are giving our subjects all this money and this food and these resources for all of their all their industries, and this is how they live. This is how they take advantage of this stuff. They don't try to get better. They're just dying, and look at their raggedy clothes. Like, he is, like, angry at how poorly all the districts all the people in the districts are living. He's like mad at them that they're wasting it, that we in the capital are wasting our money on these people. And so that right there, I think, is just a good example of how he views it. Where again, I do think he has some ideas here and there. I do think he struggles a bit here and there. Again, him being not pre-war capital, but him post-war capital, and being a kid, and some of his other students, a lot of his other peers are sort of thinking these things too, especially about the games. Like, oh, do we really need this? Is this cruel? Is this this and that, this and that? But I think, like I said, he always comes back to the capital. He always is like, well, no, capital knows what it's doing. So there's that. And that is, again, kind of what leads to the whole Sejanus thing, where Sejanus has been nothing but nice to him, has been nothing but tried to be a good friend to him. And it's because he's district. Like, you hate to say it, like it's not quite racism, but it is classism, right? Which many people would argue is one and the same, and that's not a conversation we need to have here. But it's because he's district. There is that wall where it's like he even looks at his grandmam and is like, I feel like there are some moments where he doesn't agree with how hard his grandmam is on the districts, but he does the same thing. He does the same thing. Maybe not quite as vicious as his grandmam is, right? But he kind of has the same ideals, where that is the hump. That is the hump for him that he cannot get over when it comes to Sejanus, because Sejanus has done nothing but try to be a good friend, try to be supportive, right? Thanked him at every turn for everything Corio's ever done, tried to repay him in various ways, and Corio always tried to distance himself. He is never really there for him, even in the few moments where it's like, oh, Corio's got his back. It's really just self-preservation. That's really all it is. It's self-preservation and pity. And for it to end that way, for him to snitch, and also indirectly snitch, like, that is the lowest form. You know what I mean? Like, that is he didn't even have the gall to go up and to like contact Dr. Gall, and be like, hey, this is what's happening. He recorded him secretly with a Jabberjay and then sort of just left it to do its business. Like, what? But that is all leading into the epilogue, where I have a few things to say about Corio, and Lucy Gray pops her head again. Not physically, but just in the ideal. First thing, the 10th Hunger Games, which is the one that they just went through with, the one that we just experienced, that kind of led to all this, has been erased from history. Now, that is important to me. One, I guess, a smaller reason would be just to show the power that the capital has, and they're like, all right, we're just going to erase this, right? Also to show how important the games was, with how it went out, all the experimentation, possibly Lucy Gray in particular, has some stuff there, but also just like the mentors being the kids for the first time, and all that stuff, right? But I think two things, right? One is Corio, one is Lucy. Corio being erased from it is interesting because I guess no one will ever know that he was a mentor who won a Hunger Games, right? I mean, except for the people that lived it. So I wonder if that has any sort of record where it's like the games, or if like that's been expunged and that's been like, no one ever talks about that. At this point, it's been lost to history. I think that's a very interesting little tidbit, or omission of a tidbit, in Corio's history, right? The other one being Lucy Gray. I think Lucy Gray being wiped from history, especially since we have no idea what happened to her. I'm still very upset about that. But us having no idea what happened to her, Um, I just repeated myself. It didn't make any sense. Her being erased from history, I think, is very important because we just read the trilogy, right? Which did come out before. This is a prequel. And Katniss was from District 12. She won. She had the rebellion, all the stuff, right? But to my knowledge, they never talk about anyone else being a winner from District 12 besides Haymitch. Could you imagine? Could you imagine the parallels that could have been drawn? Like, this is why. This just adds to why Coriolanus Snow, President Snow, was scared of Katniss. Deep down, he was afraid of Katniss. We don't even have to get into the whole Mockingjay thing about how from off rip, Snow despised Mockingjays and he wished that all of them would die. They would all be extinct. He was fine with Jabberjays. He saw them here and he was like, involuntarily, he was just like, we should kill all of them. And the scientist was like, what? They all need to die. We don't even need to get into that. And the whole symbolism with that and Katniss being a Mockingjay, whatever. Lucy Gray being from 12, her being the rebel that she was, maybe not literally a rebel, you know, she wasn't like against the war or whatever, but like just a rebellious nature, how she won people's hearts before the games just because of her personality and like the stage she put on, and also the strategy that she had with that, with her face, right? With her being a performer and her being able to understand how to play towards the cameras, understand how to play towards people's hearts in these games where we were finally ramping it up to be entertainment and not just a thing people watch as a reminder. Like they were adding the interviews, the whole mentor thing, right? Her winning the games as a District 12 in the way that she did, again, with all of her flourish, it really was a precursor to Katniss's games. She had the strategy too. She knew how to play towards the camera. She wasn't good at it, but she had the strategy in her mind. Like she knew that that's what she had to do. Her being the rebellious type, her sort of just saying whatever she wanted because that was true to her, the same way Lucy was true to herself the whole time. There are a lot of connections that can be made. And so could you imagine if it wasn't erased? Like, again, you understand why they wanted to do this. Because it would have been powerful for Katniss, for them to have that, and for them to, probably not immediately, but like definitely after the first book, after the first games, and them sort of hitting the stride of like, oh, you know, it's kind of inciting a revolution. Haymitch would definitely have been like, all right, listen, I got something I'm gonna have to show you, and you need to understand something. And then him play the tape of Lucy Gray's. I mean, again, it wouldn't have worked because obviously Snow would be there, you know, so that would cause a whole thing. But like, or maybe that would have been crazier to be like, yo, this is crazy from the Lucy Gray angle, and also the young President Snow angle would have been insane. You know what I mean? So like all that connects to like they erased it. They erased it, you know? And again, from a writing perspective, from this being a prequel, I don't know how planned this was when the trilogy was written. It's a very convenient thing to be like, oh, it was erased, and that's why there's no mention of it in the trilogy that's already written. But I don't think it's just convenient for convenience sake. Like, I think it being erased makes complete sense. So yeah, I love that. Some other things with Corio. He did get admitted into the university under Dr. Gall, which of course explains how he is so connected with the games as it goes in, and you know, as it goes further and being the president and all that. So also just the evilness that occurs. Yeah, it all makes sense. The, you know, the mutts being a huge part of the games, like, you know, it all circles around. Another small thing: the plinths do adopt him, which is sort of diabolical on on Corio's end because you killed their son and you're just letting them adopt you and love you with all their heart. What an insane move! What like this book again? We go back to the question of like two things, right? Does this book do a good job connecting young Snow to the Snow we now know? As we see the end of his life in the trilogy, and also, one question I had towards the beginning was, I think I mentioned this already, but like, are we going to care about Snow? That's obviously what prequels do, especially when people write prequels on the villains or the antagonists. It's like, oh, they're going to make us care about him and give us a whole new perspective on the original story, right? And I think they do a pretty good job. I think overall, though, there is always this edge to his character that is unlikable. Again, him, just the amount of patriotism for the capital is insane, and it is hard for us as a reader to kind of get over that. Then obviously him betraying certain people like Sejanus and all that, and then towards the end his paranoia causing him to flip so violently on Lucy Gray when Lucy Gray has done nothing but been like the best thing to ever happen to his life aside from Tigress. Like again, it just kind of hits those dominoes of like there are parts of you, Snow, that I like, but there are parts of you that I absolutely do not like. Um, so again, him just being this just diabolical in this sense to just live your life under the home of the parents of the son that you murdered because he was rebelling. And again, something that I was thinking about through this book is like, why do you care so much? Just let Sejanus do what he's gonna do. He's either gonna die, and then it's not your problem. He's gonna get arrested, and it's not like none of this is your problem. And then so what? He succeeds. Then what happens? Again, you don't want the third one because you have this such a strong like all the propaganda that that the Capitol issues every day. It's worked on you. That's why you can't give it up. Because a normal person would just be like, listen, Sejanus, I'll be honest with you. I don't agree with what you're doing. I don't love what you're doing. I can't help you. But I'm not going to stop you. You do you. Just know that if you get into trouble, I'm not going to help you. I'm also not going to stop you. That's what a normal person would do. Especially if deep down they don't like the Corio does not like Sejanus. There's a few moments when he sort of goes to bat for him, but again, it's more so just if you look back on every time that he quote unquote helps Sejanus, it is always to help himself. It is always to help himself or just to stop Sejanus from doing what he's doing because he's like annoyed at what he's doing. It is never to actually pull him up. Pull him up by the hand. Get him up off of that cliff that he's about to fall off of. It is never for that. Ever. Another thing we learn is that Dean Highbottom and was it Crassus Snow, which was Corio's father, created the Hunger Games. We have the story finally of why they hate each other, or why Highbottom hated Crassus, is because Highbottom came up with the idea for the games as a joke. Because they were like spitballing, when the games first started, or when the war ended or whatever, they were spitballing ideas to like make the districts make them pay or whatever. And he thought of the idea of the games. Crassus actually liked the idea legitimately, wanted to do it. Highbottom didn't like the idea legitimately. He was like, no, this is not something that I really want to happen. And Crassus took the idea and submitted it, and it was accepted clearly. So that's why they hate each other. So that was a very interesting tidbit of like, oh, there's a little explanation here finally after all this time. Again, I don't really think that's fair to hate the son for something the dad did, but I get it now. And now it kind of flips the script on Highbottom in our minds. At the very end, they flip it and we're like, oh, Highbottom's a good person. He's not fully good. Again, I don't think it's fair to blame the son, but and again, he's the one who came up with the games, but he didn't actually want it, So there's that. And in the very end, we're just gonna combine my last 2 points here. Corio thinks that he is going to, uh, he would ensure survival for survival's sake. And I'm going to pair that with my other note, which is he poisons Dean Highbottom. So this really is the cap on Coriolanus Snow and who he turns out to be into the President Snow that we know and love, or that we know and hate. I was very interested to see if they were going to make it so Corio secretly hates himself. Right? I think I mentioned this maybe last time, or maybe this is again just me thinking internally as I was reading the book. But I was thinking that I wonder if they're gonna do that. I wonder if they're gonna make it so he hates himself, he hates who he's turned into, and he's just doing it out of duty, right? Like he's doing it because he hates the games, but at this point it's too far gone, and there is order throughout Pan Am, so he just keeps doing it. But every night it's the classic, like, a very strong front for the cameras and for the Capitol and all that stuff. But then he goes home and he like drinks himself to death, and he's like depressed. He's eating tubs of ice cream and he's crying and he hates himself, right? I was wondering if that's the angle they were gonna go with it. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like he believes everything he's doing is right. It is for the best of Pan Am. The districts need the capital because without the capital, the districts would fall into chaos and everyone would just kill each other. Again, like I said, all the propaganda that the capital has been serving to its people, especially the last 10 years since the war, worked on him. 100% worked on him. And yeah. And then even the little thing at the end with him poisoning the dean, it's like, what an insane thing to do, you know? Again, it does connect to what we know of him, where it's like, those are the rumors, right? That is how President Snow got to where he's at, is that he poisons people. Yeah. It's just tough, man, you know? It's just like, they do not make his character likable. I think towards the beginning he is, but as it goes on and on and on, it's like there are just things that are very hard to dismiss and very hard to just write off as, he'll grow out of it, because he doesn't. Yeah. So overall, this book did a very, very good job of building up the Corio character. This book was not unnecessary, like many prequels are. I think it was a very good time, very good story. I hate what they did with Lucy Gray, but again, it is very poetic. So I guess from a writing perspective, I love it. From just a person who loves the character, I hate it. We never do see what happens with Tigris, though. I was very interested in that. I said this, I think every part. I was like, what happens with Tigris? Because it feels like Tigris has some resentment, or there was some sort of falling out between her and her cousin, but we never see it. We never see what happens. That's sad. Maybe we'll somehow see it in the Haymitch story, because that's, but I don't know. Anything else to go off of? No, not really. I think that's everything. So, yeah. Let me know what you thought of these last 10 chapters. Let me know what you thought of the book as a whole. I thought it was very, very good. I thought it very much stood next to the trilogy. So that's good. Obviously, at some point, I think next year is when the next book comes out. Again, it is supposed to be a prequel, not to this, but to the trilogy. It's going to focus on him. I imagine Haymitch will be the main character, and it's going to focus on his games. So that'll be fun to see him in that setting. And I mean, it's funny because with this book, it's like, okay, we know what Snow ends up to be, but we don't really know the story of this, like going into it. And now we know. Right now, it's like him at the games, Lucy Gray, all this stuff, right? Going into Haymitch, it's like, if it's focused on the games, we know how the games ends. I mean, unless there's some like secret behind the scenes type stuff that they're gonna flip, but it's like we learn how the game ends. Like he uses the force field to his advantage, and he kills the last person. Like we know how Haymitch's games end. So I wonder what the story is gonna be, right? Um, so yeah, we'll obviously get to that, next year when that book releases, I'm sure. And yeah, I guess the only thing now is to let you all know what the next series we're gonna be doing is. And that is pause way too long for dramatic effect. We're gonna be starting the Cirque du Freak series by Darren Chan. There are 12 books in total. Don't get intimidated by that though. Books are short. Books are shorter. They're shorter. They're like 200 pages, give or take. So not a whole lot. That's about how long the sections were that we read, for Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So, very short. And also the reading level is a little lower too. I think it's a little closer to like Percy Jackson in terms of like reading difficulty. So not only is it shorter, but it is a easier to read as well. It's not like King Killer where it's like, okay, we need to slow down a little bit. So yeah, which all that is to say, we are going to read one book a week because, like I said, they're short and easy to read and they're fun. The first one is A Living Nightmare. It's very good. I don't want to say too much about it. It does have to do with vampires, which is very apparent. So that's not a spoiler or anything. It has to do with vampires, but not vampires in the way you think. I don't want people to think, oh, I don't like vampires. Nah, vampires in a different way, from a different angle. It's good. Trust me. This is a series that I've read all the way through. I don't believe there's any novellas or short stories or sequels or prequels or anything like that. I read it all the way through. Actually, I lied. I literally just lied to you. There is a prequel series focusing on one of the characters. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to give anything that could be a spoiler, but I haven't read that. And we might get into that in the future, but that is not part of this. Just reading the 12 books, Cirque du Freak, book 1 next week. Read the whole thing for next week. It's A Living Nightmare. And I remember really, really enjoying this. Really, really enjoying this all the way through. And that is it. That is everything. So until next time, read the entirety of A Living Nightmare by Darren Chan, part of the Cirque du Freak series. And let's all just wonder what happened to Lucy Gray. I finished that and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm just like, what? Why would you do this to us? Why would you, Suzanne Collins, why would you do this to us? This sucks.